Please be seated. The court is now in session. Today the chamber will continue to hear the testimony of the expert Elizabeth Baker, and that she will conclude her testimony today as scheduled by the chamber. Ms. Sakalwati, could you report the attendance of the parties and individuals to today's proceedings? Sakalwati, good.
Recordings of interviews granted to Pol Pot, Ieng Sary and Ieng Terit. We have searched the records and found certain traces of audio recordings of some interviews. And in Refs D21R on the record, interviews with titles such as Ieng Sary, Phnom Penh, 1978, Ieng Terit, Pol Pot, Dinner, and Pol Pot interview. You also received mail sent to you by the co-investigating judges in August 2009 regarding specifically those interviews, and you replied to a letter from the co-investigating judges. Both that letter and your response is on record, D281 and D282. You provided some information in that letter. However, if it is possible, I think we will give you during the coffee break this morning and the lunch break this afternoon copies of those audio recordings so that you may tell the chamber whether or not they reflect what you said in that letter. And we will ask certain additional questions regarding the exact circumstances and the dates on which those interviews were conducted. So for the time being, this is the information I wanted to provide to you, so that this morning during the coffee break or this afternoon during the lunch break, you will have an opportunity to listen to those recordings. In those recordings, we hear the voices of Pol Pot, Ieng Sary, and Ieng Terit. That may be very interesting for the chamber. Let me point out that for the time being, we do not have any transcripts of those interviews.
President, thank you, Judge Lavey. And before I hand the floor to the defense teams, the chamber would like to remind the defense teams that during your questioning session, please leave a sufficient pause between the question and answer session, as it has been requested by the interpreters. And just leave enough pause, and probably you can also observe the time that the microphone for the expert is triggered. And I'd like now to the floor to the defense team.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honors. Good morning, Counsel. Mr. President, before I continue my questioning to the expert, my client informed us that he has two follow-up questions relating to answers provided by the expert yesterday. So before I continue, I would like to ask your permission that Nguyen Chia asks the questions that he has, the two questions that he has, to the expert. Would that be possible?
President, yes, The chamber allows him to do so. And Mr. Nuon Chea, you have the floor. Nuon Chea. Good morning, my compatriots. Good morning, Mr. President, and good morning, Your Honors. And good morning, Madam Expert. I would like to put two questions to you. One, the United States government engaged in the interference and came to invade Cambodia, in particular for the period from 1970 to 1973. It engaged in bombardment for 200 days and nights, totaling about 3 tons of bombs. And as a result, many innocent Cambodian people died, and the destruction of the houses, rice fields, and pagodas. And I'd like you, the expert, to give us the reason for that bombardment. And that is my first question, and I'd like you to respond before I proceed with my second question. President and Madam Expert, please respond to the question put to you by Mr. Nuon Chea.
Thank you. The reason the United States government gave for the bombing in general was supporting the Khmer Republic. As you know, after the coup d'etat in 1970, the United States took over full support of the Khmer Republic's military campaigns and supporting their government. I'm going to, I believe, interpret your bombardment to mean aerial bombardment. And specifically, when you talk about the days, I believe you're mostly talking about the very intense campaign in 1973. And that was the result of the fear at that stage of, one, that the Khmer Republic would lose, and two, the belief by then the administration of Richard Nixon that by bombing, the Khmer Rouge would come to the negotiation table. At that point, the Paris Accords had been signed with Vietnam, with the North Vietnamese, and Laos had also made an agreement. And the whole force of the American policy was to end the American involvement and make it so that U.S. troops can withdraw. So the belief, and I'm only telling you what the United States government believed and why they said they were doing this, was to entice the Khmer Rouge to the negotiation table. That failed. And the United States Congress, because they did not want any more reports of innocent Cambodian people being killed, the rice fields being bombed, the United States Congress passed a law to end the bombing. It was upheld by the Supreme Court, and on August 15th, 1973, the bombing ended, and there was no more U.S. aerial bombing of Cambodia in the war.
Nuon Chea. And this is my second question. Is it your opinion that the United States government shall be responsible for the tragedy that it inflicted upon the Cambodian people? Or Is it because it is a powerful country, it can go and invade any smaller countries at its own discretion? And that's all. Thank you. President and Madam Expert, please respond to the question by the accused. Thank you.
Is the United States responsible for the tragedy involved in the destruction, material and human beings who were killed during the bombing? Of course. And that continues to be a debate. And in fact, just a couple of weeks ago, when Mr. Henry Kissinger was testifying before a committee in Congress, some American citizens tried to do a citizen arrest of him. It's an ongoing question, and it's a very live question. Can the United States invade any small country at once? No. The international law says no.
Thank you, Mr. President, for allowing Nguyen Chia to ask these two questions. Good morning, Ms. Becker. I will follow up with some questions relating to your answers yesterday. I would like to revisit one topic and then a special part of one topic, and that's the answer that you gave to me regarding Tet Sambat. You remember that I read to you two quotes from Northwest Zone cadres from his book. And at one point in time, in answering your questions, my questions, you said, well, we should take Tet Sambat with a bit salt, with a grain of salt. Sorry, that was the expression. To be honest, that answer surprised me a bit, and I did some thinking about it last night, and I also looked on the internet in relation to your answer that you actually had nominated him for his documentary Enemies of the People. And I believe, if I'm mistaken, please tell me, was the Knight International Journalism Award that he won. And in relation to that award, you are quoted as follows, and please tell me if that is correct. Sambat has accomplished the equivalent of a miracle. Nothing else like Enemies of the People exists in broadcast journalism. End of quote. Did you in fact say that to the world?
Oh, absolutely. That's why I mentioned it yesterday. And I didn't say Tet Sambat per se should be taken with a grain of salt. I said the testimony of two cadres should be taken with a grain of salt. In fact, I was on Tet Sambat. Particularly what was unusual was that he filmed former cadre demonstrating how they killed during the purges in democratic Kampuchea. And I've never seen that before or since.
But then I'm still not sure if I understand why these two particular cadres that I quoted, why their statements should be taken with some grain of salt. What is your reason to say that?
I'll repeat again. All of us researchers have looked through the files. We've combed them. There's not been any other testimony like that except the officials who are rationalizing what they did with that kind of, with that line. So two people out of all those years of researchers, the evidence is overwhelming the other way.
Mr. President, with your permission, I would like to cite one or two paragraphs from a very recent filing that we made, or that we did. It's not on the interface, but I will be slow in identifying it. It's a filing of our team on 26th of January 2015. It has the E number E335/1. The particular English quote, the ERN number is 010575505, and the Khmer version is 010575510 and 511. What I intend to put before you is excerpts from an interview that Ted Sambat gave in the week after the judgment of August 2014. There was an interview he gave to VOA Khmer. The interview was on Cambodian radio on 13th and 14th of August, and he said, and I quote the following: those who initiated and caused starvation, arrest, and execution in the Mr. Nguyen Chia or Mr. Pol Pot's regime are still living and are in the government. Lower-ranked leaders acted excessively, and most low-ranked people secretly betrayed and opposed Pol Pot and Nguyen Chia. And those who can testify about this, to whom Mr. Ted Sambat has spoken, and I quote again, really want to speak, but have security concerns and need security assurances if they are to testify. And then the third quote, his second documentary film, which he says, and I quote, illustrates a conflict called the Secret Civil War in the Khmer Rouge regime and what was behind those killings. End of quote. So, hopefully Mr. Ted Sambat will be testifying before this court soon. He has indicated his willingness. And what he seems to be suggesting, based on his 10-year research, is more or less what I put to you yesterday, that there was in fact a civil war almost immediately after 75 between two opposing factions. And I would like to have your reaction to these quotes.
President, Madam Expert, please wait, and the International Co-Prosecutor, you have the floor.
Your Honor, what Defense Counsel has done is read very small portions of a large book by Tet Sambat, and then given his view, which is not supported in my opinion by the book, about the crimes of democratic Kampuchea and who's responsible. Reading the book of Tet Sambat, what he makes it clear is that Nguyen Chia is responsible and has acknowledged responsibility for the purges and the killings of people in democratic Kampuchea. So putting a small portion of a book and not the entirety to the witness, I think is unfair and not helpful to the truth-finding process.
Mr. President, I'd be very happy to read the complete interview. I'd be very happy to read other passages from the book, but I don't think in respect of time that would be helpful. I think Ted Sambat and also Rob Lemkin, by the way, are very clear in their views based on their research that there was in fact a civil war between two possibly equally strong factions. And I think the expert is perfectly capable of answering or again reacting to that proposition.
I would kindly ask Your Honor to counsel to find one passage in the book where Tet Sambat says that during the DK regime, there was a civil war ongoing.
The book is, as we all know, the book is based on the documentary Enemies of the People. We also know that Tet Sambat, together with Lemkin, was very busy with making a second documentary film. And the question, the central question in that second film, which is still to be released, is exactly this proposition. But I'm not quoting from the book, I'm quoting from what he said very recently in an interview to VOI Khmer Radio. So I think I'm entitled to ask that question.
President, the Chamber would like to hand the floor to Judge France to clarify this issue. That is the objection by the prosecution to the question by Nguyen Chi's defense. And Judge France, you have the floor.
The Chamber shares the prosecution's concern about what appears to be a pattern of, let's say, selectively representing or misrepresenting documents and asking witnesses, experts, etc., to comment on it. For this reason, we allow the question, which was, do you think there was a civil war pretty soon after 75 in the country, but you're not required to comment on other arguably selective excerpts put to you by counsel? Please answer the question.
My thing. The answer is no. It's the same answer as yesterday.
Very well. I would like then to take you to another document which we discussed briefly yesterday, and that is the report made by Geng Biao, Mr. President. That is, as said yesterday, document E307/521. As a matter of fact, yesterday I saw that there is a full Khmer translation of this document. That is for the benefit of the interpreters. There was some discussion yesterday about the relevance of this report, and I think I'll briefly guide you through what we believe is the high relevance of this document. It says on the first page, that is ERN 01001620 and Khmer 01063793. It's an editor's note. On January 16, 1979, Geng Biao, a member of the Chinese Communist Party Politburo and Secretary General of the CCP Military Commission, and currently elevated to the position of Vice Premier and Minister of Defense, delivered a report exclusively for internal use, analyzing the situation in Indochina after the fall of the Pol Pot regime. Geng Biao himself, when addressing his comrades, he is quoted as follows. That's the same page, the first page. Since the situation has changed very rapidly, to enable all leading cadres of various ministries and departments of the party Central Committee, the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, the State Council, and the party Central Committee's Military Commission to have a clear understanding of the situation, Chairman Hua Guofeng has especially appointed me to make a simple report on the situation of Indochina to you on behalf of the party Central Committee, and to give a preliminary explanation of the party Central's Committee assessment of the situation, as well as principles and policies to cope with as to avoid unconcerted action and possible difficulties in the future. So it's not somebody's opinion, but it seems to be there seems to be strong proof of that this document is a reflection of the actual Chinese perspective. Now, yesterday I gave you a quote already from this document. I would like to take you now to 2 or 3 more quotes from this document. Mr. President, that is English ERN 01001622, Khmer 010-63796, and 79697. It's in the middle of the page, page 381, it says on top. In 1973, in order to remind the Cambodian leaders to maintain constant vigilance, Chairman Mao also told Sihanouk that Ho Chi Minh had talked with Chairman Mao about the establishment of an Indochina Federation. After 1974, Vietnamese troops coordinated with the revolutionary forces of Cambodia in various battles in Cambodia. Vietnam seized the opportunity to cultivate a group of pro-Vietnam Cambodian leaders. The seed of disaster was thus sown. He then moves on to say, and I quote again, on the other hand, there were too many factions among the Cambodian forces. 3 main factions were formed at that time. The first faction, composed of Cambodian workers and peasants, and under the direct control of Pol Pot and Khieu Samphan, was the majority and the main force of the Liberation Army. The second faction consisted of the royal forces, faithful to Sihanouk, and old patriotic officers, and men from Lon Nol's troops who turned against Lon Nol and joined the Liberation War. Members of this faction were not many, but all of them were well-trained allies of the Communist Party and sympathizers of the revolutionary cause. And then, importantly, of course, and I quote again, the third faction was the well-equipped pro-Vietnam group consisting of quite a few members. And then I move on to the next page. Mr. President, 01001623 ERN English, Khmer 010-63798. Excuse me. Can I please finish my question at least?
President, the International Co-Prosecutor, you have the floor.
Apologize to counsel if I interrupted his question. I was just going to request that he read the last sentence of 381 that goes over to 382 in order to put this into context.
Mr. President, did I interrupt the prosecution when he was selectively quoting Interread in her interview? No. So I can read the whole thing, but I have limited time and I would like to go directly to the point. We all can read, but
President Counsel Coupe, could you hand a set of documents to the expert so that he can follow your question and respond to your question appropriately? If you probably read only part of the question, it will be difficult for the expert to respond. And I think in the past, this kind of practice has been objected by the defense.
I'm very happy to give my copy of this document to the expert. It's a little colored, but I think also we put this document, we referenced it in our email, and I think it was sent to you. I'll be happy to give you my copy.
And Ms. Baker, can you actually view the documents that the defense has? If that is the case, then please deliver your own copy for her so she can also notice the highlighted portions of your question.
Did you also read the next page where it says 4,000?
Yes.
The report is no doubt critical of the way certain things were handled in DK. But nevertheless, notwithstanding that criticism, the Chinese authorities, the Chinese Communist Party, clearly distinguishes three factions. And indicating that the Vietnamese-backed faction consisted of 4,000 cadres. Now, in the light of the civil war, as cited by Tet Sambat, does that change your position, or would you be able to react on this document when it comes to this distinguishing of those three factions within the Khmer Rouge?
I'm going to put aside Tet Sambat because I've already told you I admired his movie. The movie does no way has this civil war. So so I think I've answered that question. Now, this document that yes, I did read, but I should let you know that I can't bring my computer in and read it on the screen. So that's why I've asked you for the document, and thank you for giving it to me. I appreciate it. This very much reflects this reflects what the DK has told China. There's no question about that. And I find, when reading it before and I read it now, the first time, if you remember correctly, the first time that DK did have a purge of Cambodians who were in Vietnam were the ones who came, who had settled in North Vietnam after the Paris Peace Accords of 1954-55. And so that was the first real purge. Now, here, this supposedly, there was no actual physical evidence of Khmer Rouge DK troops with Lon Nol remnants force in the West. In fact, the people who eventually fled DK and became the front for the Vietnamese invasion and occupation were the other side of the country in the East. So there's a lot of internal contradictions in this. So does this accurately reflect what DK said to China and China's reactions to what DK had done? I think it does. It does accurately reflect, but that's not, of course, what research says.
Thank you for your answer. What makes you say that the source of this information is only DK and not China's own intelligence? As you know, we discussed that briefly. China had many people within DK and had a most likely very good intelligence position within DK. What makes you say that it is only DK feeding the Chinese and not China having its own intelligence position and reaching that conclusion?
Because, as I wrote in my book, the Chinese told me they were hamstrung. They did not have freedom of movement. That they, in fact, I quote one of the top Chinese diplomats as saying they were hamstrung. They did not have good intelligence. And as I pointed out, there's been a recently new book by Andrew Murtha going into at length the fact that the Chinese did not have the kinds of movement or intelligence they wanted. So that's why I said that.
There's no reason to go into discussion about that book. I read that book, of course, as well, and he just spoke to some lower-ranking Chinese cadres, so I'm not quite sure if I agree with that. However, setting aside the Geng Biao report, you, and I think especially Ben Keenan, is writing extensively about attempts to bomb the country, Siem Reap, sabotage attempts, coup d'etats, attempts to coup d'etats, possibly poison attempts to poison Pol Pot and Nguyen Chia. Would it not seem that in connection with that evidence there was indeed an opposing faction from the very beginning trying to sabotage the Pol Pot faction?
Could you please read where I said that?
No, I'm not saying that you said that, but I'm saying that you also, especially Ben Keenan, is writing about the bomb attack. 30 people got killed in Siem Reap in 1976. In Confessions, there are stories about attempts to poison Pol Pot and Nguyen Chia. And there are all kinds of other secondary evidence indicating that there were plots to overthrow the Pol Pot and Nguyen Chia.
President and the international lead co-lawyer for civil parties, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I said yesterday, so that the parties may follow properly, Council has to allow us to understand what happened. He's referring to Ben Kiernan without telling us which work in particular. He's speaking about confessions without saying which confessions. So unless the contrary is proven, Mr. Koppe is a lawyer, and so we would like our colleague to stop testifying and that he puts questions to that allow the parties to follow the proceedings. Thank you.
Mr. President, it would be really helpful if the civil party lawyer knows a little bit about this case. She objected yesterday about me quoting Poncho and Vickery, and now she's again contesting very basic information that everyone can read in Keenan, Header, anywhere. So it's not that I'm asking something very peculiar. I'm asking something about what is widely described.
Mr. President, I'm simply going to ask, simply would like my colleague to be courteous. This is something normal in a trial. The point is not reading and doing the work instead of us. We are in a courtroom. There are certain rules that have to be followed. Our colleague has systematically, since the beginning, misrepresented the evidence that he is quoting. We simply want to follow the proceedings in a loyal way. When he quotes Kiernan, I would like the President to ask him to refer to the text that he's speaking about. When he speaks about confessions, I'm asking you, Mr. President, to tell our colleague to indicate to us which confession he is speaking about. That's all I'm asking for.
President, the observation by the International Lead Co-Lawyer for Civil Parties is appropriate. And Counsel Coupe, please clearly refer to the documents that you used as a reference in your questioning to this expert.
For the record, Mr. President, I'm cross-examining an expert, and I can trust, hopefully, that she has basic knowledge of events between 75 and 79. But I move on. Ms. Becker, I would actually like to take you to an interview that you took with Ingrid, and an interview that was discussed in relation to questions by the prosecution. That is E3/659, English ERN 00182322, Khmer 007-41117, and French 007-4304748. It is page 25 of your verbatim interview. When the prosecution was reading this part of the interview to you, I think he was omitting an important piece of this interview, so I would like to revisit you this passage again. At one point, Ingrid, and that's on the top of the page, answers your questions as follows. Yes, I was traveling in order to see the conditions of the people, and at the time when I came back in Phnom Penh, I reported to our leaders that there was something queer in some provinces. For example, in Battambang. I saw something very clear, that they make all people going to the rice fields, very far from the village, and they have no home. And I saw they have no home and they are all ill. I reported to my leaders that. You interrupt her and then you ask Ingrid, who were your leaders? Who did you report to? And then she answers to your question, to the Prime Minister. That's quite queer. It's not normal. There is something wrong in this. In fact, when they made inquiry, they saw that So Pim was an agent of the Vietnamese because he was an ancient member of Indochina Communist Party. You see, and at the time they joined in a new party. But when the Vietnamese, Runim and Battambang, So Pim was in the east, he was in the northwestern region. It's a little incoherent, but that's what she says. You go back to her and you ask her, so this is 1976. There was a purge in 1977. And then she answers, at the time I told my leader there is something wrong in that province, because I know the directives of the Prime Minister, not young, not old people, not pregnant women, not women feeding babies, and not small children. But I saw everybody there in the rice fields, in open air, nothing, and with the sun, very hot sun. I saw many people ill of diarrhea and malaria, so I reported it to him. And then you ask, and what happened? And Ingrid answers, they made an inquiry, and in the end, in 1978, we, and you say, executed, question mark. And then she answers, and that is the quote, no, we arrest him. We know that Ru Nim was in big collusion with So Pim in order to carry out the orders of Yoon, in order to sabotage our policy and to massacre our people. So in this way, they can make people rise against us because they don't know. People know only Pol Pot, and they don't know this. They don't know. They know that this is an order of Pol Pot. They don't know that Pol Pot don't order all of them to go to the rice fields. It's to cause dissatisfaction among people. And then you say, essentially, you are saying that you were not in control. Now, it would seem to me that, and correct me please, Ms. Becker, if I'm wrong, that Ingrid is trying to say that she saw things in the Northwest zone which were not in accordance with party guidelines, that she saw all kinds of things happening that shouldn't be happening, that it was reported, and that it was apparently considered by Pol Pot and possibly others as sabotaging the revolution, and that they took the appropriate measures by finally arresting him and, of course, as you know, executing him. The question to you is, what Ingrid says here, isn't that in essence what Ted Sambat is saying as well, that there was a civil war going on and that the other side was sabotaging the policy of Pol Pot?
Again, if you please, I don't know what this Tet Sambat. Can we just forget this?
Yes, forget Tet Sambat.
This is the rationalization, and I will step back a minute and explain how this looked. This is after they've been overthrown. This is later. She's talking to me. What hasn't come out, I think, in the questioning is the sheer incompetence of democratic Kampuchea. You can have all kinds of directives, but you see in all kinds of reports, materials weren't sent, people didn't understand directives. You have illiterate cadre who are supposed to read reports. The incompetence cannot be stressed too much. So this is an example, I think, one of the incompetence, and two of with incompetence, the attempt to have when you have a country turned into an entire police state with open-air labor camps, you're going to have problems of control. And so I think this wasn't surprising to me. Now in the 21st century, you immediately think of North Korea or something like that with similar kinds of attempts, and you have these huge problems. And I thought it was something of her to admit to this. So one of the reasons I used the interview.
Thank you for your answer, Ms. Becker. I have some smaller follow-up questions. What can you tell us about the phenomenon in DK called the Workers' Party?
Can you be more specific, please?
Does the name, the etiquette Workers' Party mean something to you in context of DK?
There are many different contexts. I'm still not sure. It could mean many things. It's like asking me about the Vietnam after 1975.
Do you know if in confessions and in the black paper and in other DK documents, the suggestion was put forward that the other faction, in fact, had its own party called the Workers' Party.
Yes, that's true.
Is there anything else that you can tell us about this?
It's the theme that you see, particularly after 1977 in particular, and the rationale for large-scale purges of cadre and their family.
Is it your opinion that there was no such thing as a party next to the CPK called the Workers' Party?
You mean a secret party operating during DK? No, I did not see proof of that, no.
Thank you. Another question. Does the name Hei Sao mean something to you?
Just like that, I can't think, no. Can you remind me?
Yes, it seems he was a high-ranking Vietnamese communist operating in DK, supposedly having contact on behalf of Vietnam with Sao Pim and Ru Nim. Does that ring a bell?
No.
I'm looking at the clock. My national colleague has some more questions, so I would like to give the floor to him. Thank you, Mr. Becker.
President, thank you. And Councillor Sumisa, you have the floor. Sumisa, thank you, Mr. President. And good morning, Ms. Elizabeth Becker. I only have some questions to put to you, and it will take only about 20 minutes. When you came to Cambodia in 1978, how long did you stay in Cambodia?
2 weeks.
During the 2-week period, can you tell the court the important places that you visited?
We went east, Kampong Cham, up to the border. We went to the northwest, Siem Reap, Battambang, went through Kandal down to Sihanoukville, back, and then, of course, many places in Phnom Penh.
For each place that you visited, can you tell us, if you recall, whom did you interview?
I'm afraid my memory is not that good. It's all in my book, and I would have to, I'm not going to bore you with reading it, but the major people I did include in the book. Did you want me to read it to you?
Thank you. In fact, I have read your book. My point is, during this short stay visit, you would have recalled the most important interviews that you engaged in. For example, whether your trip's purpose was to concentrate on the condition in the cooperative or something like that.
Yes, that was one of the themes. The condition of the living conditions, the the military situation. Up north in the Northwest, it was rice experimentations, some of the fishing issues around the Great Lake, Tonle Sap. Down south in the port in Sihanoukville, it was exporting to Singapore and I believe Hong Kong some rice. As I said, on the border with Commander Pin, the possibility of Cambodia holding back Vietnam on the border. So those were the major. And then in Phnom Penh, of course, were more policy. And again, the major interviews were with Foreign Minister Ieng Sary and with Prime Minister Pol Pot.
At that time, did you yourself go alone on your own, or were you always escorted within the delegate?
Three times I went on my own. 3 times, I believe, 3 or 4 times I went on my own in Phnom Penh. When it was discovered that I was going on my own, the guest house was locked. Otherwise, and on one of those trips, the 2 other, Richard Dudman and Malcolm Caldwell were with me, but this was walking around Phnom Penh. Otherwise, in everything else, we were with generally Tuan Prasit, several armed guards.
When you were alone or amongst your team without the armed guards, what kind of information you considered important from the encountering with other people during such time?
It was very short because one of the guards would come and find me, so I never was able to go and come back. And what was important was, in fact, that I didn't find many people. The city was very empty. The important information was what I saw. I saw, for instance, I walked past the Central Market. It was empty. The life that I knew there of people meeting there, having coffee, exchanging gossip, buying things, empty, nothing. The parks, there were no children playing, nothing. Schools were empty, no students. There was no life. And in some of the side streets, in fact, I saw buildings that were falling apart and used as warehouses. So there was behind the facade of the beautiful, Manivong or Nordam, I saw a decrepitness.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you another question in relation to the killing of one of your team members. Can you provide a little bit of further details regarding that incident?
If you wish, you want me to pick up from what I was saying the last 2 days. I gave my personal account. I can't say that without a little bit of difficulty, so I would like you to tell me what details you would like.
I'd like you to tell the court regarding the incidents that happened on that date. For example, what happened during the daytime, the president interrupted. In fact, counsel, the expert already responded to such a question, so your question is considered repetitive. And if you would like a certain specific timeline or point to be clarified by the expert, please do so. Because your question is repetitive, and you are not allowed to do that. Council, thank you, Mr. President. When you saw the guard before he fired or he shot your team member, can you recall the specific physical appearance of that individual when that person came to knock on your door?
This is after Malcolm has been killed, right? You're talking about that, the guard who came to rescue me?
No, I meant before he had been killed.
So at the very beginning, I will begin at the beginning is what you would, I'm presuming that's what you want. He did not knock on my door. What happened was, it was late, we were all asleep, and you know, in democratic Kampuchea, there are no phones, you're completely isolated, dark, and I was woken up by strange noises, and in my dreams, as I was waking up, I thought I heard garbage cans or some sort of loud noise, and that I was back in Washington, D.C. in my apartment. And then I woke up and I said, of course not. I'm in Phnom Penh in democratic Kampuchea. I had never seen a garbage can. And then I pulled on my jeans, and then I left the bedroom. I was on the ground floor. I was the only woman. I was on the ground floor. I walked from my bedroom into the foyer, and as I was arriving right in the center of the room, from the door, the outside door coming in, after hearing gunshots and smelling the cordite, in comes a fellow with ammunition across his chest. He's wearing, dark clothes, but he has a different kind of baseball cappy kind of thing on, very Khmer. And I said no in English and in Khmer. He had the pistol pointing at me, and I ran back into my room, and he did not follow me. He went up to the second floor, and as I said, I hid in the bathtub on my stomach, which is what you learn as a war correspondent. It's the only natural fortress. I heard him run up the stairs because the bathtub was under the stairs. Then I heard many gunshots. And after that, I did not see him until much later, hours later, when we were... and I went through that before, and I didn't see him again until we were taken up to Malcolm's bedroom, and Malcolm's body was there, and his body was there as well. He was dead.
After that incident, and as you stated earlier, Ieng Sari said that the one who committed the killing was Vietnamese, and some guards were arrested as a result. Did you see the guards who were arrested in order to compare their physical appearance to those people who involved in the gunshots?
What I know about the people arrested were contained in documents from Tuol Sleng, and the names of those guards were stewards. They were identified as stewards who were in charge of helping us, the people who helped take care of our daily needs.
based on your personal conclusion, was the killing arranged or organized by Pol Pot, or was it organized by somebody else?
I have, as you can imagine, I've looked into this quite a bit, and I do not pretend to know who did this. Internal documents and my own personal eyewitness, having gone through it, is that it was within the Democratic Kampuchea, and I do not see. Beyond that, I can't say. When your fellow defense lawyer asked me, I said, if you force me to give an answer, I would say it would be someone within Democratic Kampuchea who was unhappy with Ieng Sary's opening up the country to us non-friendly delegation foreigners, which was all part of, as I said earlier, the invitation to Secretary General Kurt Waldheim and then to foreign journalists like Mr. Dudman and myself.
Thank you. I'd like now to move on to another topic that is on the administrative structure of leadership of Democratic Kampuchea at that time. Who were the senior leaders or officials of DK at the time of your visit?
You mean Pol Pot, Nuon Chea, Son Sen, Vorn Vet, Khieu Samphan?
Could you provide a little bit further details as upon your arrival in Cambodia, who were the people or members of the cabinet or ministers of the DK?
The entire leadership? Sure. Just a second, please. As I said, Pol Pot was the number one. Number two was Nuon Chea. Vorn Vet, Khieu Samphan. If you don't mind, I mean, my memory is not brilliant. Okay? Did you want me to specifically talk about?
I'd like you to give us some names as to who were in charge. For example, what was the roles and functions of Pol Pot, Ieng Sary, or Nuon Chea at the time of your visit, so that I can put follow-up questions to your response.
Pol Pot was the General Secretary. He was the Prime Minister, and he was in charge of the country. Nuon Chea was his number two. Ieng Sary was the Foreign Minister. I would have a hard time going through the whole thing in the United States. Do you want to ask me the question, please? I'm sorry, but...
In 1978, what was Nuon Chea's function within the government besides the party's structure?
Economic, charge of the economy.
President, the time is appropriate for a short break. And Council, please try to make your questions as brief and precise as possible and try to avoid repetitious questions. We'll take a break now and return at 10:30. And court officer, please assist the expert during the break and have a return through the courtroom at 10:30. The court is now in recess.